Last week, Steve from Gamers Nexus posted a video about getting scammed by Newegg because they refused his RMA return of a $500 open box motherboard, claiming the socket had pin damage, even though Steve never even opened the package. I commented on that video offering condolences to my friend Steve, and also mentioning that, hey, that quite literally used to be my job at Newegg, RMA Inspections, where damaged returns and other fun things got sent to be assessed. And since so many people followed up asking for more, here's just a bit of a talking head video with some more details on my experience doing that job, and yes, a little bit more about that rattlesnake.
Excellent!
So for starters, a disclaimer. The things I'll be talking about today are from 15 years ago. I no longer work for Newegg. I do not speak for them. I don't even think I really know anyone who still works there anymore, to be honest. I left to pursue other interests, my YouTube channel mostly, in 2014. I have no idea how Newegg processes RMAs or handles exception situations now, so please don't apply anything I say to their current processes, and also keep in mind that businesses don't usually like details of their internal processes disseminated publicly, so if some parts are more vague, it's either due to my memory failing or because I'm falling back on general knowledge of common e-commerce logistics practices versus my specific experiences at Newegg. My thoughts on Steve's situation are that it sucks. No one wants to throw money away to the tune of $500, and it's all the more frustrating because he did nothing wrong. Steve, as the host and proprietor of Gamers Nexus, has means to seek recourse. Newegg has already tried to get in touch with him since the video posted, and you could say that he has recouped his loss somewhat via views and exposure of this incident, but many people who replied to Steve and said that they had the same experience couldn't do anything about it and just had to eat the cost of whatever product they attempted to purchase. And while no one, aside from Newegg I guess, knows how commonplace Steve's situation is, I think the best way that I can add to the discussion is to offer my suggestions on how RMA processes in general could be improved. Not saying that I used to do it better, but based on Steve's experience, yeah, I definitely did. But what is an RMA and how is it processed and why do we need one? RMA stands for Return Merchandise Authorization, and for online sales, typically, an RMA number would be issued for a return to process and track it through the returns process. As far as Newegg goes, again, in my past experience, there are two types of RMAs. You could have an RMA for a refund, or you could have an RMA for a replacement. And those could be issued by customer service, or you could go online to the Newegg website, you go to My Account, and then you look at your order history, and you can create an RMA there. If you're trying to get an RMA for a refund, there would automatically be a 15% restocking fee applied to that unless it was waived specifically by a customer service agent. And that was typically pretty easy to do. All you had to do was call customer service or use live chat, tell them that you're doing the RMA for some reason that wasn't your fault, like you were sent the wrong item, and they would typically remove the restocking fee so you would get a full refund. All right, so here's a very loose diagram of the old warehouse where I used to work. At the front of it, they had customer service offices where they had desks and lots of people working, taking calls and everything like that. Over on the side of the warehouse is where trucks would come in and drop off stuff. So you'd have an incoming area right here, and then those things would get loaded onto a conveyor belt. This conveyor belt went around in the direction of these arrows here, and there were stations going along it. Each station would handle a specific product type or category. They would scan the RMA barcode that was on the product, or it was supposed to be on the product if you abided by the RMA instructions when it was sent to you, and then the item images would show up on the warehouse staff's display right there, so they could compare those images to what was returned and verify that all the packaging and accessories were there. And this brings up a question: why, when items are returned to a place like Newegg, do they need to be returned completely with the packaging and all the accessories? And that's because these products are often not bought directly from the manufacturer. They're often bought from big distributors, such as Ingram Micro or D&H, or a couple of the big ones that I remember. Since they're not bought directly from the manufacturer, the big distributors have strict return requirements. And in my experience, the distributors are also very keen on rejecting anything that's incomplete or that has mistakes in any way. Then the distributor might charge a fee if the return was incomplete, and Newegg didn't like paying those fees, so that's why they requested everything back from the customer. Now, as it's going down the conveyor belt here and it gets to the station where the warehouse employee checks it out, if everything checks out okay and then there's no damage or anything, then they would post it. And that means the RMA is okayed for that refund to go through, or to initiate the replacement order to send out a replacement to the customer. And then that product ends up over here in the out area, and that would get sorted to go back to its point of origin, the distributor or the manufacturer usually. Now, if there's a problem, like a missing retail box or accessories, missing or damaged parts of the product itself, or if the item that was returned isn't even the correct part from the order, it would get sent to my little corner of the warehouse over here, RMA Inspections. Also, just about any random package that was shipped to this RMA warehouse without any RMA number or just random stuff that arrived would often end up on my desk too, because they just didn't know what to do with it otherwise. Basically, I was the lone customer service agent who worked out in the warehouse, at least at first, and my job was pretty straightforward by description. When an RMA was flagged for inspection on that initial conveyor belt where they went around, it would send an automated email to the customer saying your RMA has been sent to inspections, it'll likely be delayed by 2 or 3 days, and it would add an entry into my queue in our system. I would pull up that queue, I would match an RMA item from the pile of boxes that had been set next to my desk to an entry in the system, and then I would see what could be done to resolve it. Most of these returns fell into a few different categories. One was missing the retail box or accessories. RMA instructions from the email that customers would get sent say return the item completely with all packaging and accessories, but not everyone does that. As mentioned, products often come from distributors, and many customers were understandably not aware of the requirements that Newegg was held to in order to get credit for returned products. So I would email the customer and say, hey, could you send in the missing stuff that wasn't included? And often they would find those things and return them, and once they arrived back to me in a few days or a week later, I would process the RMA. Sometimes the customer would say that the box was thrown away or the accessories couldn't be found, in which case I would know that accepting the return would constitute a loss of money for Newegg. And here's the part that seemed to be missing from Steve's experience. At that point, I, as a sentient human being with at least some capacity for critical thinking, would assess the situation based on the product's value, how much of a loss it constituted. And also I might consider things like the customer's order history, their value to Newegg as a customer long term, and even sometimes their return history to see if they were regular offenders in terms of sending incomplete returns. Then, often I would make an exception, take the lost and post the RMA, or less often I would email the customer to say, I'm sorry, we cannot accept the return and the item is being sent back to you. Damaged items are the next common thing, and those are not supposed to be eligible for RMA, but customers would often send in damaged stuff anyway, or things could get damaged in shipping, which we would usually issue a claim for with UPS or the shipping company for reimbursement and handle it that way. But according to the rules, if you were to have bought something like a motherboard and then you damaged it while installing your CPU or whatever, then that's your loss and Newegg was not responsible. But I, at least as the inspections person at the time, was able to look at each item and assess each on a case-by-case basis. I saved many customers a lot of money because I was good at fixing bent CPU pins, the PGA ones like on current Ryzen CPUs, which I would bend back in line with a razor blade and fix to the point that they could be socketed again, and then we'd be able to accept the customer's RMA. LGA motherboards were a bit too delicate to do that too reliably though, so sometimes I would just have to deliver bad news and refuse returns when nothing could be done. But for a situation like Steve's, regardless of the condition of the board, the fact that it was open box originally would have made me accept it no matter what. Open box products are usually sold as is, but they can vary pretty wildly in how well they're handled before they're resold, and they're usually a product that the company or the retailer has already accepted a loss on. Open box usually means that the retailer has repackaged the item and it has been used or at least opened in the past, but it's still supposed to be functional. And this is different than refurbished items. Refurbished products are usually packaged back up by the manufacturer, who can replace parts, add back missing accessories, and do more validation to make sure the product is fully functional. So to my mind, there's a lot more potential for a bad product to be resold as open box versus refurb, and I would almost always take the customer's side in that situation as a result. The third common thing in RMA inspections was wrong item RMAs. Sometimes the customer would say that they received the wrong item originally, like Newegg just shipped them the wrong thing. That's the reason they need to RMA it. But sometimes the customer wouldn't say anything about a wrong item, but the product we received back was clearly not what was supposedly shipped to them. And at the time, it was understood that sometimes wrong items get shipped, so we would usually process those based on the customer's claim. But some customers can be a little shady. That's just how it is. And although my main job was to help customers who were having problems with their RMAs, another aspect was protecting Newegg from fraudulent returns. This was 2005, so a common trick some sneaky customers would try to pull was the old optical drive swap. You take your old 24-speed CD-ROM drive from your Compaq or Gateway or Dell desktop PC or whatever that you bought in 1998, you swap in the shiny new DVD burner that you just bought from Newegg, then you take the old drive, pop it in the box and return it for a refund while congratulating yourself for being so clever and unscrupulous. My typical response was to check the manufacture date on the returned drive, and then I would tell the customer that, you know, when this drive you sent us was manufactured in '98, Newegg did not actually exist. And I also had a digital camera so I could snap pictures to add to email replies, which was very helpful for sort of proving situations like that. So those 3 RMA problems were the most frequent, but the thing that kept the job interesting was the other random things that would come across my desk. This was back in the time of standalone MP3 players and DVD burners, and I will say I was fond of backing up some of the music that would just come through that was loaded up on those devices, just in case the customer needed it, of course, not for my own personal use. Another common return was digital cameras returned because the customer just didn't need it anymore, but then I'd find they left the SD card in the device and it was clearly purchased to document one event, like a night out or a wedding, before being sent back totally unused except for the SD card full of photos that was in it, because you know that's cheaper than just renting a camera. I also had an I don't know what to do with this stuff pile, which included a shipping damaged standalone AC unit, which I plugged in and fired up in the summer of '05 because it got pretty damn hot out there in the warehouse. Unfortunately, the exhaust for the AC couldn't reach outside, so it was just cooling and blowing cold air onto me while dumping hot air into the warehouse 20 feet back from my work area. I didn't use that too often, but it was something that I did. And then there was the breast implant, of course, which I still have, but when it arrived, it presented a great mystery. Why was it so big? Who shipped an implant to the Newegg RMA warehouse? Why was there only one of them? How can it be so squishy and yet so utterly indestructible? I reached out to every point of contact that was listed on the shipping box for this thing. I never heard back. So now it is an heirloom of my kingdom, but I always imagine that there's somebody out there who had the other one, who only got one breast implant, and they eventually just gave up on the other one arriving. And then there was the rattlesnake, and I had some pictures, but I searched everywhere and I can't find them, so you're just gonna have to take my word for it. But basically a box arrived to the warehouse, it had holes poked in it everywhere. A dude opened it up, he saw there was a rattlesnake, he freaked out and dumped it out. I was kind of alerted to the commotion from my area over in the corner, so I went to check it out. And then because I have some past experience, my friends Eric and Troy, when I was in elementary school, their mom was the reptile lady, and so she had all these like snakes and big lizards and stuff like that, and she taught me how to hold snakes. So although it definitely wasn't the best idea at the time and I should have just waited for someone else, I didn't want anyone to get bit by a rattlesnake. Of course, I'm very selfless in that way. So I went over there, it was against one of the base rails from one of the conveyor belts. I got a big sheet of plastic and I just sort of draped it over the top of it, and then I circled around behind it and caught it by the nape of the neck. That allowed me to lift the whole snake up with the plastic around it, and then we put it into a box, and that's when I took the pictures. So even the pictures that I did get, I remember them, it just looked like a little snake head poking out of the bottom of a box with some plastic. And then eventually animal control arrived and took the rattlesnake away, so I saved the life of every person working in the warehouse and every customer service agent that day, and they all owe me a life debt. But let's get back to the main subject of this video, Gamers Nexus, Steve's situation, and how I think it could have been handled better. In my time at Newegg, there were always things that I thought Newegg customer service got right. For instance, each agent had at least a $25 cash credit that was available that they could issue to customers just to resolve complaints. People could call in irate about some situation, and if you're just like, oh, well, I can offer you a $20 credit, then suddenly they're not mad anymore, or at least they're a lot less mad because honestly, money talks, and that makes sense. I always felt like it was a genuinely customer-oriented department, and that satisfied and happy customers were more of a goal of Newegg CS than doing the bare minimum to save money at the time. And honestly, that's what it all boils down to, is time and money, business expenses, and whether or not Newegg thinks there is ROI, or return on investment, in shoring up these departments that handle these situations in 2022 and beyond. ROI is often measured in raw numbers, but I think there's a lot to be said for some of the more intangible benefits that customer-facing policies can generate, such as public opinion, which is often impacted by stories like Steve's. And so that's my solution. Dedicate more time and more money to the positions that handle RMA exceptions at present, and get back to the customer-centered service model that would never have let a return like Steve's linger for so long before being ultimately rejected. So in closing, I just want to say that I am not necessarily recommending that everyone stop shopping at Newegg or anything like that. If there was a better alternative that could be recommended to everyone, then maybe I would say yes, go for that. However, I do think it is important to hold Newegg accountable for their decisions and the way they treat customers, and if enough people have an experience like Steve's, that should be publicly broadcast so people can be aware, especially if they're buying stuff like open box items, items of some of the risks that are involved and maybe some of the recourse that is available if you do get stuck in the same situation yourself. This video has been pretty interesting for me to put together though. It's been a while since I thought back on those times and how I got started in the tech biz. Also, it came up that all of my old Newegg TV videos are gone. They're no longer on Newegg TV. You can go back to some old videos and you can see Steve there, but it seems like everything with me or with Kyle has been purged or at least set to unlisted or private. So that is a bit of a shame, but it does make me glad that I went and pulled the videos that I really enjoyed. So I do have backups myself of some of the content that I produced while I was there. But that's gonna wrap it up for this one, guys. I would be extremely interested to hear your feedback on this subject in particular. How are you guys feeling about Newegg as a retailer? Did you learn anything more about the RMA experience by me sharing some of this? Would you like to hear more anecdotal stories about my time in the industry? Let me know in the comments while you're down there. If you want to hit the thumbs up button, that would be greatly appreciated. If you enjoyed this video, you can also find a link to my store at paulshardware.net, or you can buy shirts, mugs, pint glasses. You can't get these breast implants. Actually, they don't even make them this way anymore. They don't come pre-filled, but I don't really want to get hung up on that too much. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and we'll see you in the next one.